The year is 1519. In the shadow of the Templo Mayor, the greatest pyramid in Tenochtitlan, a girl counts her final sunrise. She is 15 years old. Her name is Xochitl, which means flower in Nahuatl, but the priests stopped using her name 3 days ago. Now she is simply the chosen one, and in the stone chamber where they keep her, she can hear the drums. They have been beating without pause for 72 hours, a rhythm that matches her terrified heartbeat. Through the narrow window, she can see the peak of the pyramid where the altar waits, stained black from centuries of blood. What she doesn't know, what no history book will tell you, is that death on that altar would have been a mercy. Because what the Aztec priests did to captured virgins before the sacrifice was a systematically orchestrated horror that combined religious devotion with calculated cruelty in ways that still disturb archaeologists today. The question isn't whether you can handle the truth about what happened in those temple chambers. It's whether you're willing to understand how an entire civilization convinced itself that these horrors were holy. If you've ever wondered how faith can justify the unthinkable, you're about to find out. If you're interested in archaeological evidence from the Templo Mayor excavations and Spanish missionary accounts that documented these rituals before they were lost to time, don't forget to subscribe. Every view helps us uncover more of the truths that were buried beneath centuries of silence. Now, let's return to that stone chamber, because the drums have stopped, and the priests are coming. To understand what happened to Xochitl, you need to understand the machine that created her fate. The Aztec Empire in 1519 was at the height of its power. Tenochtitlan, built on an island in Lake Texcoco, held over 200,000 people. Its pyramids towered over causeways that stretched for miles. Its markets traded goods from civilizations 1,000 miles away. But beneath this grandeur lay a religious system that demanded one thing above all else: blood. Not just any blood, the blood of the innocent, the blood of the pure. The Aztecs believed that the sun god Huitzilopochtli required human hearts to continue his daily journey across the sky. Without constant sacrifice, the world would end. The sun would stop. Darkness would consume everything. This wasn't metaphor. This was cosmic law. And the most powerful offerings were young women who had never known a man. Virgins captured from enemy territories during the Flower Wars. These were not wars of conquest. These were wars explicitly designed to capture sacrificial victims. According to Spanish chronicler Bernardino de Sahagún, whose Florentine Codex remains the most detailed account of Aztec life, written between 1545 and 1590 based on interviews with Aztec survivors, the priests maintained detailed records of captured virgins, age, appearance, lineage. Everything was cataloged, because to the Aztecs these girls weren't human beings. They were sacred currency, the price of survival. Xochitl had been captured 6 months earlier during a raid on a Tlaxcalan village. She was washing clothes by a river when the Aztec warriors arrived. They didn't kill her. They bound her hands with rope and marched her south toward the great city. The journey took 12 days. Other captives, men and older women, were separated. Some were sold as slaves. Some were sacrificed immediately at smaller temples along the route. But Xochitl and 7 other young women were taken directly to Tenochtitlan. They were virgins. They were valuable. When she first saw the Templo Mayor rising above the city, its twin temples painted red and blue against the sky, she thought it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She didn't know she was looking at her tomb. The preparation began immediately. This is what history erased. This is what even the Spanish chronicles barely whispered about. Because what happened in those months before the sacrifice was designed to break not just the body, but the soul. First came the purification. Xochitl and the other girls were taken to a compound near the temple, a place called the Calmecac, where priests trained and sacred women lived. They were stripped of their clothes and bathed in freezing water drawn from sacred springs. The priests examined them. every inch making sure they were truly untouched. If a girl was found to have lied about her virginity, she was strangled immediately and thrown into the canals. Her body would feed the fish. But Xochitl passed the examination. Then came the isolation. For 6 months, she lived in a windowless room. She was fed twice a day. Maize, porridge, and water. Nothing else. The priests said hunger would purify her spirit, make her acceptable to the gods. She lost weight. Her ribs began to show. Her hands trembled constantly. But hunger wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the waiting, knowing what was coming and being powerless to stop it. According to archaeological evidence discovered during the Templo Mayor excavations between 1978 and 1982, led by Mexican archaeologist Eduardo Matos Moctezuma, the bones of young women were found in offering caches beneath the pyramid. The skeletal remains showed signs of prolonged malnutrition before death. These weren't quick sacrifices. These were girls who had been systematically weakened over months, turned into living ghosts before the final ritual. But here's what breaks your heart. The priests weren't monsters. They genuinely believed they were saving the world. In their minds, these girls were being elevated, transformed into goddesses. The suffering was necessary. The pain was sacred. One priest who oversaw the preparation told Xochitl this directly. "You should be grateful," he said in Nahuatl. "You will become eternal. Your blood will feed the sun. Your heart will join the gods." She didn't feel grateful. She felt terrified. On the night before the sacrifice, the preparation entered its final stage. Xochitl was dressed in white robes embroidered with red flowers. Her hair was braided with jade beads. Her face was painted with sacred symbols, red ochre on her forehead, black charcoal around her eyes. She was made beautiful because the gods demanded beauty. Then came the drug, a drink made from peyote and other hallucinogens. The Spanish called it aloliuqui. The priests forced her to consume it, not to ease her pain, to make her compliant. Within an hour, the world began to dissolve. The walls of her chamber seemed to breathe. The priests' faces became masks. Time stretched and contracted. She could no longer tell if she was awake or dreaming. This was intentional. Spanish missionary Diego Duran, who documented Aztec rituals in his Historia de las Indias de Nueva España, written in 1581, described how victims were drugged before major sacrifices. The priests wanted them conscious but docile, aware but unable to resist. At dawn, they came for her. 4 priests dressed in black robes stained with old blood. They didn't speak. They simply lifted her and carried her out of the compound. Through the streets of Tenochtitlan, past thousands of people who had gathered to watch. The crowd didn't jeer or mock. They prayed. They chanted. This was a holy moment. The girl in white was walking toward divinity. Xochitl's vision swam. She saw faces, thousands of them, blurred and indistinct. She heard drums and flutes and voices singing in unison. The drugs made everything feel distant, like she was watching herself from outside her body. But she could still feel the rough stone beneath her bare feet, the hands gripping her arms, the terror pulsing in her chest. They carried her up the pyramid, 114 steps carved from volcanic rock. Each step was steep and narrow. At the top, the twin temples waited, one dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, one dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god. Between them, the sacrificial stone, a large slab of basalt, slightly curved, designed to arch the victim's chest upward, to make the heart accessible. The head priest was waiting. His name was Tlacaelel, a title meaning he of the Lord's house. He wore a headdress of quetzal feathers and held an obsidian blade. This blade was sacred. It had been used for hundreds of sacrifices. Its edge was sharper than any steel. Xochitl was laid on the stone. 4 priests held her down, one at each limb. She tried to struggle, but the drugs had made her weak. Her muscles wouldn't obey. She could only watch as Tlacaelel raised the blade above his head. But here's what the history books don't tell you. What happened next wasn't quick. The priest didn't simply plunge the blade into her chest. That was for common sacrifices. For slaves and prisoners of war, virgins received a different treatment, something far more calculated. Tlacaelel began with a cut across her abdomen, not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to cause excruciating pain. The shock cut through the drugs like lightning. Xochitl screamed. The crowd below roared in approval. This was the moment of transformation. The moment when the human became divine. Then came the second cut. Across her chest, slowly, deliberately. The priest was skilled. He knew exactly how to prolong consciousness, how to keep the victim aware for as long as possible, because the gods demanded to see fear turn into acceptance, suffering turn into transcendence. Bernardino de Sahagún recorded testimonies from Aztec priests who described this process. The victim must remain conscious, one priest explained. The moment of heart extraction must be witnessed by the soul within. Only then does the transformation complete. Finally, Tlacaelel made the deep cut, through the sternum, between the ribs. His hand plunged into Xochitl's chest cavity, and grasped her heart. She was still alive, still conscious. She felt him tear it free. For a few seconds, impossibly, she remained aware. She saw her own heart, still beating, held above her in the priest's bloody hand. She saw the sun, bright and terrible, burning in the sky above. Then, nothing. Her body was pushed down the pyramid steps. It tumbled and broke on the stone. At the bottom, other priests waited. They dismembered her. Arms, legs, torso. Everything was separated. Some parts were burned as offerings. Some parts were given to nobles as sacred gifts. Some parts, according to Spanish accounts that still disturb modern historians, were consumed in ritual cannibalism, not for sustenance, for communion, to take the divine essence into themselves. But Xochitl was just one. According to Spanish conquistador Bernal Díaz del Castillo, who witnessed Aztec sacrifices and recorded them in his Historia Verdadera de la Conquista de la Nueva España, written around 1568. The Aztecs sacrificed between 20,000 and 80,000 people per year at the height of their empire. Exact numbers are disputed, but even the most conservative estimates put the death toll in the thousands annually. Many of them were young women. Many of them went through exactly what Xochitl endured. This wasn't random violence. This was systematized horror. A machine of death that ran on faith and fear in equal measure. When the Spanish arrived and saw the skull racks outside the Templo Mayor, the Tzompantli, with tens of thousands of human skulls displayed like trophies, they couldn't comprehend it. How could a civilization so advanced, so cultured, so skilled in art and architecture and astronomy, also practice such calculated cruelty? The answer is simple and terrible. They believed it was necessary. They believed the universe demanded it, and they built an entire society around that belief. After the conquest, the Spanish destroyed the Templo Mayor. They built a cathedral directly on top of it. They burned the codices that documented the rituals. They forced conversions and erased as much of Aztec religion as they could. For centuries, the stories of girls like Xochitl were lost, dismissed as Spanish propaganda. Exaggerations meant to justify conquest. But then came the excavations. In 1978, electrical workers in Mexico City accidentally uncovered a massive stone disc depicting the dismembered goddess Coyolxauhqui. It was part of the Templo Mayor. The excavations that followed revealed the full horror, offering caches filled with human remains, skeletal evidence of sacrificial victims, young women with cut marks on their bones, obsidian blades still stained with ancient blood. The archaeological evidence confirmed what the Spanish chronicles had described. This wasn't propaganda. This was historical fact. The Aztec Empire sacrificed thousands of people, including young virgins captured specifically for that purpose. And the rituals were exactly as brutal as the documents suggested. So why does this story matter? Because it's not about the Aztecs. It's about what human beings are capable of convincing themselves is right. It's about how faith, when taken to its extreme, can justify any horror. How an entire civilization can watch a 15-year-old girl have her heart ripped from her chest and call it sacred. Call it necessary. Call it beautiful. The Aztec Empire fell in 1521. Tenochtitlan was destroyed. The temples were torn down. The priests were killed or converted. The rituals ended. The rituals ended. But the memory remains. In the bones beneath Mexico City. In the Spanish chronicles written by men who witnessed horrors they could barely describe. In the archaeological evidence that proves these weren't myths or exaggerations. These were real girls, with real names, with real terror. Xochitl was not her real name. We don't know her real name. The records didn't preserve it. But somewhere in the offering caches beneath the Templo Mayor, her bones remain, mixed with hundreds of others. Young women who were told they were becoming goddesses, who were drugged and dressed and paraded and slaughtered, who died believing, or being told to believe, that their suffering had cosmic meaning. If this story doesn't disturb you, nothing will, because it reveals the darkest truth about human civilization, that we are capable of anything, absolutely anything, if we believe the gods demand it. You just witnessed one of history's most systematically organized horrors. If stories like this remind you how dangerous blind faith can be, how easily cruelty can be dressed in sacred robes, then subscribe and help us keep these voices alive. Because some truths deserve to be remembered, especially the ones that make us uncomfortable. The girls who climbed those pyramid steps deserve more than silence. They deserve to be remembered for what they truly were. Not goddesses, not sacred offerings, not cosmic currency. They were children, terrified children who died in agony while thousands watched and called it holy. Their bones lie beneath one of the world's largest cities now, buried under centuries of concrete and progress. But their story endures. In the archaeological evidence, in the chronicles, in the horror we feel when we truly understand what happened to them. Xochitl's heart was offered to the sun god over 500 years ago. The Aztecs believed her sacrifice kept the world alive. That without her death, the sun would stop rising. They were wrong. The sun kept rising. It rose the day after she died. It rose when the empire fell. It rises today over the ruins of the Templo Mayor. And every sunrise is a reminder that the gods never needed her heart, that her death meant nothing to the cosmos, that she suffered and died for a lie. Remember that. Remember her. Remember her, all of them. Because forgetting is how history repeats itself.